Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Transportation and Parking Commission meeting for June 28th, 2010. Let us begin our agenda, please.
Item 1, regular business agenda. Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Fuad.
Here.
Commissioner Sahakian.
Present.
Commissioner Yakubian.
Here.
Commissioner Wiseman.
Here.
Chairperson Welch.
Here. Next item, please.
Item 1B is flag salute. Chairperson Welch.
Would everyone please rise for the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Item 2 is posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, June 28, 2010 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, June 25, 2010 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Item 3 is approval of minutes. At item 3A is May 24, 2010 meeting approval of minutes.
Very good. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? Anyone have any comments or corrections? Can somebody move the minutes, please?
I move the minutes be approved.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Chair. Just one thing, that is Commissioner Sahakian was not
Wasn't
present,
present,
so you would need to,
Abstain.
make that statement and abstain from the vote.
We're taking a vote on it, right?
You don't need to
You
take a
don't
vote
need to,
on it,
okay.
but you would just state that
I
you're
was expecting
abstaining.
the vote. Okay.
That's-
I was not present at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. So minutes have been moved and seconded. Next item, please.
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I have no speaker cards for oral communications, so I'll close oral communications. And moving on to item number 5.
Item 5 is information and update. Item 5A is implementation of mobility study.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Coe.
Okay, Chairperson Welsh, members of the Commission, good evening. I'm Wayne Coe. I'm with the City of Glendale Traffic and Transportation Division. I'm representing John O'Bagdanian, who is not able to attend the meeting today. For the first item, we have Mike Nielsen from the Community Planning Department, who's going to give us an update on the city's mobility plan.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Transportation and Parking Commission. Tonight I will be giving you an update of the mobility study and some of the policies we've been working on for the last 4 months. As you know, that we have gave a City Council a comprehensive update on the mobility study back on March 9th. We'll basically be giving you an update of some of the policies we've been working on over the last 4 months. First, I'll let you know what we've been doing with parking standards. One of the tasks that we're going to start analyzing are potential parking incentives downtown. We anticipate an update on those recommendations sometime in late 2010. Another task we've been working on is updating downtown wayfinding and parking signs. Back in October or November of 2009, Council awarded a contract to Hunt Design to update wayfinding signs and parking signs downtown. Shortly after that contract was awarded, they did a citywide sign assessment. And then from there, we did some very preliminary design sketches of potential wayfinding and parking signs. From there, we were going to give Council an update back in April last month. We put that item on hold, and since then we've been focusing on programming parking signs and for the lots and structures. Some of that involves looking at the locations of signs for handicap signs, entrances and exits on the parking structures. This is an example of the first floor of the marketplace structure. So there's a lot of things that are not directly involving design that we're working on. One of the results of the site assessment that Hunt did was that a lot of the signs that we have in the city throughout the lots and structures downtown and throughout just general wayfinding downtown is a lot of the signs were confusing and misleading. So what we're doing right now is that we're looking at where the sign locations would be and the messaging and what the messages are would best fit throughout downtown, whether that's in the parking lots, structures, or pedestrian wayfinding, vehicular wayfinding. So we're looking at doing this through the summer. Once North Star Marketing, our citywide marketing consultant, comes back with recommendations later in the summer, we'll start working with them and moving forward with the design. And then from there, one of the larger projects we've worked on the last 4 months has been involved with preferential parking and analyzing South Brand in terms of their parking issues. Some background on this was back in December 7th, we gave you guys a report on parking issues involving multifamily throughout the city of Glendale. From there, we came up with TPC came up with you guys came up with recommendations back in February for the city council to study parking issues comprehensively in the South Brand neighborhood. From there, city council responded to your recommendation on March 9th and awarded a contract to Nelson Nygaard to study those issues further. From there, what we've done since then is we have selected a survey area for South Brand, and the north, it's approximately 1 square mile. We have surveyed Colorado Street is the north boundary, Glendale Avenue is the eastern boundary, San Fernando Road is the southern boundary, and Central Avenue is the western boundary. Within that survey area, there is approximately 200 small businesses, the Brand Boulevard of cars. We also have four schools and 2 large churches, and also a lot of multifamily residential housing. From there, we did staff from traffic and transportation and community planning, collected a lot of data. We looked at all the parking regulations for all 161 blocks of the survey area. We looked at where all the red curbs are located, all the permit restrictions, all the time limits, loading zones, and then once we collected all the regulations, then we went and actually collected all the available on-street parking spaces. So basically collected a parking inventory of everything within the survey area. After we did that, we conducted a occupancy count. We did 1 weekday count on Tuesday, June 8th. We also did a weekend count on Saturday, June 19th. We basically collected counts once every 2 hours, starting at about 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night on weekdays, and from about 8 in the morning till 8 at night on the weekend count. After we did that, we also wanted to know what how the businesses parked and what their parking behavior was. And then we had Nelson Nygaard, our consultant, prepare this survey that surveys what the parking behavior is and what potential incentives they may be interested in. We submitted this survey out to the businesses in May, and since then we've received responses from the businesses. We've been collecting that, and we are in the process of submitting those responses to Nelson Nygaard for their analysis. So at this point, we've collected a lot of data, and we're at the point where we're ready to send that data over to Nelson Nygaard for their review, and they're going to prepare some recommendations, and our intention is to come back to you with an update on those recommendations sometime in the fall. So if you have any questions regarding what we've been working on for the last few months on the mobility study, myself or other members of the staff will be happy to answer them.
I have a couple of questions. The parking survey, was this only on-street parking that you surveyed?
We, at this point, we have surveyed the on-street parking. But we are also in the process of doing is collecting the off-street parking, but we have not collected that data yet.
But you are going to be collecting it as
We
part
will
of it?
be, yes.
Okay. And the survey that you sent out, did you survey employees or just business owners?
We surveyed both business owners and employees. So actually, what we did is what I put up on the screen is the employer survey. So that was sent to the businesses and business owners. What we actually did is we basically sent it out as a packet and sent with survey instructions. You know, the employer, the owner of the business would fill out the employer survey, and then we sent out employee surveys that the individual employees would fill out and send back to us.
How did you get those to the employees, though? Was it still sent through the business owner?
We sent that through mail. And then also for the auto dealers, we dropped, for some of the larger businesses like Glendale Memorial, the Brand Boulevard of cars, we actually dropped those businesses, those surveys off to the businesses.
Okay. Do you have any results about the numbers of respondents?
In terms of the survey respondents, we actually got a pretty good mix of businesses that are representative of the mix that is, you know, current on brand. We got quite a bit from the auto dealers. We got Glendale Memorial Hospital is actually getting back to us within this week or two, and then we got back from all the schools. We got a collection of small businesses back to us. So, talking with Nelson Nygaard, we actually got a pretty good range of businesses that responded back to us. And
on the employee level?
On the employee level, most of the employees, the businesses that responded back to us, we mostly got respondents back from the employees.
Mm. Okay.
Did you survey residents? Did you feel there was a need to?
We did not survey residents.
So how do you ascertain their need by what? I mean, how will you know what the shortages are or what they might think they need?
Well, what we did is we collected a parking occupancy survey, which collected what the parking issues were on all the on-street. That was, on business streets and residential streets. So we did not send a survey out to the businesses, but we did collect the data on a weekday count and a weekend count.
Well, do you have an idea of, based on the number of apartments and so on, do you have an idea of what the residential parking requirement is, if you will?
You mean in terms of what the residential inventory is or what the code required parking is?
Well, if there's 20 apartment buildings with 10 apartments each, does that denote a certain number of parking spaces? And have you compared that with available parking spaces? In other words, part of the inventory process of trying to decide what the shortfall is for residences?
Correct, and that answer would probably be better answered once we collect the off-street inventory.
So the offset will include residential, not just...
Yeah, that is correct. That's why we would do an off-street.
Just follow-up questions. For the businesses that they haven't responded, will there be a second attempt to contact them and put them on notice that we did send you the survey, did you receive it, and are you going to respond or no?
What we're going to do is we're going to send what we've got initially to Nelson Nygaard. They're going to do an initial analysis, and then we're going to construct whatever follow-up we need to in terms of certain businesses that we would need to target in terms of they're going to initially look at what the issues are and pick those out and target certain businesses that have not responded that could possibly be contributing to the problem. So in terms of that, we'll take a look we'll have Nelson Nygaard see.
Because you're always going to get the one business that's going to say we didn't receive anything, and that's my concern. And if it's a big, substantial business, I think we should follow up on it to see if they received it, and if they have, are they going to respond or not. The second question is, are we going to do any type of license plate study or according count for this area?
In terms of the license plate survey, we're going to determine that based on the results of the occupancy, inventory, and regulation surveys. And then what we might do based on that, we'll see if there is an issue with spillover in specific locations, and based on the initial analysis that Nelson Nygaard will do, we'll give you an update and determine if we need to do a license plate survey. later on in the process.
Mike, I had one question for you. In regard to the surveys that were given out to the employers, will the issue of the transportation demand management programs or ordinances, such as the employee ride-sharing programs, somehow be looked into further? Because as I understood it, that was heralded to be the first line of defense in reducing congestion in that South Brand corridor. So I'd like to know how, in this initial stages, we're working on that issue or that idea of tapping into that potential of improvement in that.
So there's a couple things on the employer travel survey, and I actually didn't have the employee travel survey posted on this, but one of the things that we had on the business survey was in terms of, whether you park on street or if you have available parking, and if you need to park on street, what type of incentives would you like to have available in order to what would you like to see? Would you like to see free or reduced transit passes? Would you like to see guaranteed ride home? So there was a list in terms of the employee survey on what incentives that they would be interested in having us offer them. So in terms of transportation demand management, we have started that initially with the way we constructed the surveys. With the way the employer surveys were in terms of the business owner, we had them list out what they would be interested in potentially, and also if they offered parking at their businesses or if they were interested in incentives. So, and also in addition to the way we constructed the surveys, we also looked at when we're sending these recommendations up to Nelson Nygaard, we're not just sending them survey data. We've also going to send them all the recommendations that we put together when we were in the multifamily subcommittee, and that included a lot of things on transportation demand management. And in terms of our consultants' experience in terms of parking policy, they're going to look at a wide range of benefits, and that certainly will include transportation demand management.
Very good. Thank you.
Are you going to be looking at the permits that were issued to the various businesses when they got their permits to build? Because I know there's been some controversy about there were certain requirements made of parking, how it was going to be used, and maybe that those have or haven't been followed by the various business owners. Is there going to be a look at that? And I guess maybe as sort of a fallout from that, I guess will there be some analysis of what parking requirements should be enforced or required in the future or amended or changed in the future?
Yes, that will be something that we'll look into, because that's part of what, in terms of when we get to the specific recommendations for South Brand, we'll look at what the parking supply is versus the parking demand, and that's one of the things we'll take into account.
But again, you'll look at how business owners have performed under the permits they were given.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to make one final comment about the employees versus the employers, because we certainly have heard evidence at this commission that employers along those same lines have conditions that they're supposed to be providing employee parking, yet the employees from that self-same business have reported separately that their employer refuses to allow them and they have to park on the streets. So it just concerns me a little bit if all of the employee surveys are just being directed through the business as opposed to a direct outreach to the employees. You might be getting not completely reliable data.
At this point, we're going to send it up to Nelson Nygaard, and they're going to come back to us. They've performed a lot of these surveys, so in terms of anything that comes out that might seem off or misleading, we'll certainly approach that when they'll have over the next couple of months, they'll have a chance to analyze the data, and if there's any issues that pop up, we'll certainly resolve those and come back to you with an update. And then you guys will have time to comment on those and give any additional suggestions.
Okay. Any other follow-ups?
I have a comment on the sign program.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah. Is the sign program going to be, is it citywide residential areas as well?
Right now, at this point, we are funded for downtown. The hope is to be able to expand the program citywide, but at this point, in terms of funding, the existing contract is to update downtown wayfinding signs, vehicular and pedestrian, and update the signs for the parking lots and structures.
Will there be any consideration given to signs for bicyclists?
There is, at this point in time, that's not funded, but in terms of the pedestrian signs, in terms of the vehicular signs, we'll certainly try to look at to make sure that we're including all users.
When you say not funded, I mean, what's... They say you only can look at certain things, and if a sign is appropriate for X, you don't put it in, or... I mean, what you say if it's not funded, what does that mean?
It's not, the current contract that was given to Hunt Design was to update pedestrian wayfinding, vehicular wayfinding, and build parking signs. In terms of additional funds for like bicycling signs throughout the city, that would be something that would be on a separate contract.
Yeah, if I may, Alan Loomis from the Community Planning Department. Just to clarify what Mike just said, the contract for wayfinding signage is for downtown wayfinding. I think the question you're asking, Commissioner Fawad, is bicycle signs citywide for citywide bicycle.
No, I mean even downtown. Like bicycle racks X or something. I mean, I'm not even sure what they would be, but is there in the downtown mix? Is there?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we'd be looking at that. Yeah, but in terms of there being thinking about signage for citywide bike master plan, no, that's something.
I understand that's outside the scope. Yeah.
Any additional follow-ups from anybody? Okay, we're good.
Are members from the consult here in the audience? No? Okay.
We're ready to move on.
Item 5B is Safe Routes to School program.
Actually, Chairman Welsh and members of the Commission, over the years, the city has been somewhat successful in obtaining Safe Route to School program funds from Caltrans to implement pedestrian safety improvements in the school areas. The approach we used at that time is the traffic and transportation basically decide on what kind of improvements were necessary at each school. And we get the funding, and we basically implement improvements like installation of traffic signals, in-way warning lights, and flashing beacons, that type of stuff. Over the last year, we have taken an entirely different approach to this application process. Instead of just the Traffic and Transportation Division, we get involved a number of stakeholders in this decision-making process. We have representatives from Glendale Unified School Districts, parents and principals from local schools, Glendale Police Department, staff from Traffic and Transportation Division, as well as the Engineering Division. We're taking a more comprehensive approach to this unique challenge. For last year, we have been successfully obtained close to $900,000 in Safe Route to School grant from Caltrans to do the improvements. We're happy to have Mr. Ron Snyder today to give us a presentation on the city's Safe Route to School program. Mr. Snyder is a consultant to the city who specializes in transportation planning in livable communities.
Thanks, Wayne. As Wayne said, I do a lot of transportation consulting work. Jono asked me to give you a brief introduction to sort of what I do. A lot of non-motorized work. I do bicycle plans and pedestrian plans for cities, and that leads to a lot of safe routes to school work. I also teach a course, which this is part of a national safe routes to school course, and I teach a course for the Federal Highway Administration in pedestrian design. And I help cities with the workshops and the planning work and the funding applications. So the city brought me in about a year ago after there was a little girl that was hit and asked me to help them out with the Safe Routes to School program and plan. And so I'll just go through kind of an overview of what we do. Before I get into what we're doing for Glendale, I wanted to give you a brief presentation on what Safe Routes to School is and why we're doing it. Commissioner Weissman, I think, has probably seen these slides before. But anyhow, this is from the National Center for Safe Routes to School training program. Why we're doing it is because a lot of fewer kids are walking and bicycling than they used to. Today, a small number of kids walk and bike. whereas a generation ago, many kids, most kids either walked or biked to school. Parents driving their kids to school account for quite a bit of the traffic around schools. And for kids who are driven to school, instead of riding a bike or walking, they've got a lot of health problems that result and can result. One of the things that the public health folks tell us is that this generation of kids may be the first to have a shorter life expectancy than the generation before because of lack of exercise. So promoting safe walking and bicycling is just a great way to increase physical activity, just really as an incidental part of your life as a way of getting to school. So we have Safe Routes to School programs. These are being promoted across the country and in other countries to really do two things: to make walking and bicycling to school safer, and to encourage more kids to do it. The benefits of the Safe Routes to School program are to make it safer, obviously, to reduce the number of kids hit, to reduce some of the congestion around the schools, to improve children's health, to improve air pollution around the schools, because there's actually studies that show right around the schools there's a high level of high concentration of air pollution with all the cars coming in and starting, stopping, and the buses and so forth. And in some cases, reducing cost of busing kids in, and also to just increase the kids' sense of freedom and independence and to teach them skills that they'll learn throughout their lives. Some kids don't walk or bicycle because of a distance, but it's not just that. It's more, for more kids, it's traffic. And certainly in Glendale, traffic, I believe, is probably the number one reason that more kids don't walk or bicycle to school. There's also a fear of crime danger. So with the Safe Routes to School program, we deal with that too, both perception and reality. These are slides from the Center for Disease Control that tracks obesity over a 22-year period. Starting in 1985, the states that were white there had no data. The states that are the darkest blue had 10 to 14% of adults obese. As you can just kind of see the trends over time, within 9 years, quite a few states had 15 to 19% obese, and then as time goes on, over 20%, and then quite a few in 2000 over 20%, and then in 2003, some states over 25%, and 2006, some states over 30% of adult populations obese. So this trend is happening very, very fast. And not only is it with adults, but with children. Back in the 60s, when most kids walked or biked to school, about 4% of elementary kids and about 5% of middle and high school kids were considered just overweight. And nowadays, and these are old numbers too, you see 16%, that's more like 17 or 18% today. So it's a major health issue. And kids who are overweight have a risk of type 2 diabetes, which used to be called adult onset diabetes. But, they have lower self-esteem, they have asthma that can be aggravated, they don't sleep as well, they don't function as well physically. There's all sorts of other emotional and physical effects. And, most important of all, they don't perform as well academically as kids who are physically fit. And most kids are not getting the physical activity they need. They should have at least 60 minutes per day. So, Safe Routes to School programs are a way of increasing their activity and improving the conditions that are out there, as well as reducing air pollution and so forth. We have to tailor our schools. Again, this is, like I said, this is a national issue. But we have to tailor our programs for every school. And the steps that we use in creating a good Safe Routes to School program are exactly what we've been doing here in Glendale, bring together the right people. And Wayne mentioned some of those people, but basically the stakeholders, principals, parents, the school administrators, sort of the city engineers and public works folks and the police department. We've brought all these people together in these workshops. We gather information and find out what the issues are. We make solutions, make a plan, get it funded. We act on the plan and then evaluate it and make changes. So those are the steps that we generally go through, and that's exactly what we've been doing here. Complete Safe Routes to School programs and effective Safe Routes to School programs have these 5, what we call the 5 E's. They have the engineering, which is the physical improvements, but they also have these programmatic components, the education, the encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation, all that are very necessary. And we do want to evaluate and do surveys. We've done surveys in the schools to find out what the baseline is. but we want to kind of do that on a regular basis. We have two funding sources that are out there. There's federal Safe Routes to School money, and there's a state program. It's through the state program that we got our last grant. We're applying for another grant that's due July 15th for this time around. That's also a state program. But the goals are where we've already made it safe, get kids to walk and bike, and where it's not safe, to make it safer. Lots of information if you're interested in more, saferoutesinfo.org. There's all sorts of information to be gathered there. So what we've done in Glendale is follow this pattern. We started with workshops. We've done some plans. We've gotten things funded. We're making some physical improvements, and we're going ahead with the 5E programmatic component. And we're in our second cycle. We started last year in 2009. We did these 6 schools, these Columbus, R.D. White, Dunsmore, Verdugo Woodlands, Balboa Elementary Schools, and then Wilson Middle School. And this year, we just held on May 21st another Safe Routes to School workshop. Glen Oaks, Jefferson, Lincoln, Mann, Marshall, and Muir Elementary. So we're going through our second round on that one. And so we had our first workshop last March. I think this is the one, Commissioner Weissman, you came to this workshop where these 6 schools were there. And Cara was sitting there, a parent at R.D. White was there, and sort of listened to everything and gathered lots of information and went out and did some great things with it. But this is what our first workshop was. And we do this Why Safe Routes to School. You saw a condensed version of that presentation. Then we go through the 5 E's and talk about how each one of those E's are carried out. And then after that sort of educational portion of the workshop, it's a day-long workshop, by the way, with all these stakeholders. After that educational portion, then we switch gears and talk about each school. We had 6 tables that were categorized by school, and each one of those schools had a large-scale map where the people there would draw the routes that kids commonly walk or bicycle in. They would circle the intersections and areas that needed attention, and then they would get up and they would talk about what the safety issues are. These were some of the general safety issues that we found. There's all these sort of things, speeding and jaywalk. I mean, you can read the list there. There's a lot of sort of safety issues that we found out. But here's us doing the map exercise. Again, each school kind of determining what their issues are, and then kind of writing on the map and drawing the lines. And again, the police department was there, and they've been very helpful with our program. And then each group gets up and shows their plan. And then we devised the 5E program. We kind of went through each one of these. What's our educate? What are we going to do for the education program? What are we going to do for the encouragement program, the enforcement, and how are we going to evaluate? So we really kind of developed a comprehensive program. And this is just a very partial list of the encouragement program that we came up with as the annual Walk to School Day event. And this again is R.D. White. Walking Wednesdays. R.D. White has also recently started a Park and Walk program from the Vaughns, a Walker of the Month program, contests and so forth. So that's been really good. Then we surveyed the kids to find out how they're coming in now to get a baseline. And then we created a plan from that. So I took the information that the schools gave me and again, took those intersections that they said there were the issues. They told me what the problems were. I went out to those intersections and created a plan and put it all together in this. And this is the sort of thing we did. This is a sample of Verdugo Woodlands, and the red dots are the areas that needed attention. That's where I went out and made a plan. We came up with a budget. Overall, for those 6 schools, we had a budget of $3.6 million. We could only get up to $1 million for the first grant. 10% is the city match. $900,000 we could apply for from the city. So we had to prioritize our projects, and so we reduced the number, but we applied for some projects at every school, and we won $898,000, which was just under the $900,000 max that we could win. So, and Caltrans, by the way, I also kind of teach a course for Caltrans and how to do this sort of thing. They followed the formula. The city followed the formula, and it works. when you do all the right things, you can get funded. So we got all these projects funded. This is a small sample of what we're planning to do. On the left is existing. This is in front of Columbus Elementary School on the side there, and what we would do to Columbus and Doran. And then here's another sample of Dunsmore and Santa Clarita. So just a few samples. These are all funded and going to be going in sometime before too long. So Los Olivos, Lauderdale, just a few samples. And here's the event. Cara helped to organize. I mean, it's always a pleasure for me to see people who go to the workshops and then turn around and do something, because it's really up to the schools and the parents and others to enact these programs. And she really took the ideas and made them work. And here's her first Walk to School Day event. I mean, I don't know how many people you had out there.
About 98% of our
98% of your school walked that day. So the idea with a program like this is to get kids and parents to try it. And if you like it, maybe you want to do it again, and maybe we can help you overcome some of the barriers to walking and bicycling, and then our program can be successful. But I was so happy to see what she did with this event. And the little kids got I Walk stickers and balloons, and I'm not sure what else they got, Cara, but they did a fabulous job. And they've also organized the Vaughn's Park and Walk program. So they're doing great things. Already Glendale is becoming one of the national success stories. And, in this presentation, we show what's going on in other cities. And I think in the next few years, Glendale may be on the national slideshow because of some things that Cara's doing and others. So this year, we're working on these other 6 schools. And on May 21st, we had a workshop, the same thing. We brought our stakeholders together. We had a great turnout. And this year we had, you can see there in the red, that's Jackie. She's the principal at Marshall. And she used to work at R.D. White. And now she's taking those programs that R.D. White did, and she's putting them in over at Marshall. So that's really good. Again, we did our mapping exercise. And now this is some of the plans that we've come up with. These are very preliminary. I'm meeting with the city, with Fred and Wayne and Jono and some others. These are some of the sites we're doing at Mann Elementary. Those red dots are the locations. But this year we can only apply for up to $500,000. Well, we can apply for up to $450,000. It's a 10% match for the city, so it's a $500,000 grant. So here's one of the projects we're looking at doing at the corner of Glen Oaks and Justin Avenue, and then another one in front of Glen Oaks Elementary School. So that's all I've got, but that's just sort of a brief overview and introduction of what we're doing with the Safe Routes to School program, and I could answer some questions if you like.
Well, first, actually, I'd like to invite Cara Sergile up and give her comments as well.
Thank you, Commissioners, for seeing me 2 months in a row. As you all know, my name is Cara Sergile. I'm a parent of 2 little girls who attend R.D. White Elementary School. And I had the pleasure of being a part of the stakeholder meeting last March. And we had already begun some efforts at R.D. White prior to that process being started based on the death of Mary Nalbadian in front of Toll Middle School. And so basically I wanted to give you just a little brief update on what we've been doing at R.D. White. I think we'll probably have the most active program in the city, and what we have planned for next year, and then some things that we might need from you all to help us support Safe Routes to School efforts across the city. We formed a Safe Routes to School Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Committee that involves parents, several teachers, our principal. We've been meeting now for about a year and a half in a very active, energetic group. So that's been a great piece, and it's kind of a fun thing. Everyone brings their kids and potluck dinner, and it's really become a real community builder. That's one thing. The second is we now have a full school year under our belt of our wholly volunteer Mustang Valet, which is our morning drop-off process. That was the first priority that we felt we needed to put in place based on what we were seeing in terms of the driving behaviors around our school. So what we have now are 2 zones on both sides of our school, one on Everett, and I know Mr. Weissman has seen it, on Everett and on Geneva, where we have about 4 to 5 parents every morning on each street wearing safety vests and opening car doors and moving traffic along. It's a much, much safer and quicker entry into the school every morning. So we have that under our belt. And then, as Ryan also discussed, we just piloted for the last 3 weeks of school an after-school pickup process called Park and Walk. And that is a recommended best practice from the National Safe Routes to School programs. And we obtained permission from Vaughn's and also looking in the area, in the general neighborhood, for areas where parents could park, did a large promotion and communication effort, and then basically closed the gates of our schools starting June 1st, and all of our children are now exiting out the front of the school and meeting a parent or a caregiver at the front of the school and then walking back to their cars or walking home. So our pilot was overall successful. We're planning to start it back up again in the fall, but it's been an interesting process just seeing how that's gone. Let's see here. Plans for next school year. We plan to participate again in the International Walk to School Day, which is October 6th. So please mark your calendars. I will be calling you. We had last year several elected officials join students and parents at different points around the school and join us for the walk into the school. And Senator Carol Liu came and spoke that day as well. So we'll be doing that again on October 6th. Our other plans for next school year are to have a bicycle safety rodeo sometime in the spring. And as I mentioned last month, just over our efforts this last year, we've increased our bicycle riding from 0 bikes in the bike rack to actually the last day of school, Fred, we had 6 bicycles and 2 scooters in our bike rack. So we see that as a huge success. In terms of what I need from you all that would help us, and I want to bring to your attention a couple of things, and I know that Wayne and Fred have looked at this as well, is I believe we qualify for a traffic light at the intersection of Geneva, Duran, and Balboa. That's our key crossing area for all children coming to and leaving school. And as we experienced during our park and walk process, when we had even a higher volume of people crossing in that intersection, it was dicey at best. And right now we only have 1 crossing guard there, and it was really almost too much for her to handle.
It's a 4-way stop sign right now.
Yeah, it's a 4-way stop sign. It's the road that comes out the back of the Vaughn's shopping center. So I want to raise that to your attention. Another thing that I've learned about was in January of 2008, the state of California passed an Assembly Bill 321, which allows local cities to adopt ordinances to lower the speed limit around schools to 15 miles per hour. So I really encourage us to assess which schools in our district might qualify for this law and see whether we can move forward with lowering the speed limit around our schools to 15 miles per hour. Also would like to explore how we might extend the jaywalking laws to apply in school zones. Right now, even in our follow-up data collections of parent behaviors, jaywalking is probably the #1 problem that we see on a daily basis. Parents not using crosswalks, standing across the street and beckoning children to come across the street in unmarked crosswalk areas. And so if there was a way that those jaywalking laws could be enforced in school zones, I think that would be helpful. And lastly, if schools are demonstrating an increased number of children walking, whether we can explore increasing the number of crossing guards, which I know is a budgetary issue, but especially at these schools where we have increased the numbers of students walking, whether we could get more crossing guards. And that's all. Questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. First of all, I'm very impressed by what you've done and your enthusiasm and continued efforts. Most impressive. Thank you very much for the city. 2 questions. How has you had this 98% thing? How has that continued? What's sort of been a month later? What do you have?
That was a special event. That was our International Walk to School Day event. So there was a lot of hype and promotion put around that event itself. In terms of a daily basis, our walking levels are probably only about 11 to 12% right now. The way that we've structured our program is we wanted to approach the issues which we saw as key safety issues first. So putting in process our valet lane was to us a key priority. So doing that in the morning, and then as our committee has grown, first we tackled the morning. This last school year we've tackled now the afternoon pickup process. And our efforts moving forward are really going to be more focused on walking school buses, increasing the number of, and really putting more on the education and encouragement aspects of our Safe Routes to School plan. Because we do want to get our walking levels up. And as I mentioned before, our bicycling levels are also rising. We've done some data collections from our baseline that Ryan helped with, and then we just did another one in April. And our overall walking to school has probably gone up only about 2%, but we really haven't paid that much attention to it except for that walk to school day. So that's where our efforts are going to be headed as we now have more of a stable committee and our safety issues are a little bit under better control, is to really hit hard on forming walking school buses. Another thing are called bicycle trains, and doing more efforts to encourage those.
And I didn't quite, when you were mentioned earlier about in one of your afternoon programs, you said you were going to lock the front. Well, I didn't.
Not the front gates.
What does that mean?
The process that our school utilized for dismissing children in the afternoon was they could either go out the front of the school and meet parents there, or they could go out the side gates of the school onto Everett or Geneva, where a parent would drive up and pick them up. That process was not structured, not manned, and chaotic, just like we were seeing in the mornings. And so our committee decided that we wanted to make a very bold and progressive move and have no car pickup in the afternoon. And so those gates on the side of our school are closed now, so no children exit the school campus directly to a vehicle. They must exit the front of the school, be met by a parent or caregiver, and then they can walk to a parked car in the area or walk home.
So again, in the afternoon, there's no drive-up, pickup, or drop-up?
No.
And I guess in the long run, improving the car drop-off is somewhat the opposite direction of walking, but I guess you're saying safety first and then you'll try
Exactly. We saw that probably was going to be a disconnect for people, but so far so good.
Very good. Again, I'm very impressed. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks. You're welcome.
As a follow-up question on that, and you're hoping that the parents will not be able to find parking and will start walking to school?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
If for some families, if they need to drive to school, they're going to do that no matter what, and they can find parking in the area. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to see more children walking and bicycling to school, but we all know many people just don't have the ability to do that time-wise. I myself am a working mother, and on the mornings where I don't have a meeting first thing in the morning, I try to walk my children to school one day a week, but I cannot do it every day based on the time constraints of my employer. And many families face that same thing. But the bottom line is what we can do to improve the safety of our children arriving at school in the morning and being dismissed, and then where we can, increasing the number of people walking. Because at our elementary school, probably 80%, if not more, live under a mile from the school. And it's very doable to walk.
One other question. What has been the single challenge for you?
Parent behaviors.
I was expecting that. And how are you addressing it? I'm just curious.
Like I mentioned, our committee is about 8 parents, 2 teachers, and our principal. Through word of mouth, through community building, through encouragement, through reaching out to people, and really trying to build those relationships and being very visible, I think we're breaking down some of the barriers. For example, during our pilot of our park and walk process, which was a lot more controversial than our morning drop-off ballet, people like having someone open a car door for them and move on, but when you tell them they can't, park in front of the school anymore, they don't like that as much. But I had one mother who complained. We had a very small handful of complaints, but she came up and she said, "This just isn't working. This just isn't working. It takes me too long. I have to park away and walk, and I'm doing this on my lunch break." And I said to her, "Do you understand why we're doing this?" And she said, yes, it's for my children's safety. And then I said, "Do you think you can make this work?" And I grabbed her hand. I said, "Do you think you can make this work?" And she said, yes. So a lot of it, I think, is just the initial difficulty that people have with change. It's a change in their routine. They have to think a little bit differently about what they're going to do. But I would say overall, our pilot for that process went very, very well, surprisingly.
I can't tell. And one last question, and I need your opinion on it. I know of a couple of schools on the East Coast. What they're doing, they're giving credit for PE classes. If you walk to school, you don't stay that extra hour and do your PE at the end of school. What's your take on that?
My children are in elementary school age, so I think any PE activities they have that are built into the school day, it's not at the end.
I see.
So it's probably something more pertinent for the middle and high schools. I think it's a great idea. I think you just have to look at how you're going to structure it, how you're going to communicate it, how you're going to track it and evaluate. But I think it's a great idea. anything we can
Done
do
a
to
great
get our
job.
kids moving.
I
Thank you.
commend you. Great.
Thank you.
Keep it up. And any way we can help, we're here.
Stoplight, crossing guards, AB 321.
We're going to start working on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I had one more question. I guess there's a perception that, I mean, you're talking about bike trains and cars. I guess there's a perception these days that kids cannot walk to school by themselves.
That's Ryan can probably speak to some of the data on that, but even we have organized very sort of sporadically, but this last school year and the year before that, we organized what are called walking school buses. The recommended ratios is 1 adult to 6 children, and we have not been able to get parents to just not walk with to leave their kids aside. I think, again, part of it is people need to have the relationships first and the trust. And once you as a parent know me and know that I'm a responsible
Well, no,
parent,
I'm not even talking about that. I'm saying just, heaven forbid, the kid just walks to school by himself. I assume that's based on perceptions of crime and not reality? Which is unfortunate.
The crime issue is pretty much a perception issue more than anything. Traffic is worse today than what it was when we all walked to school. But that's part of what the safety education does, is teach kids how to deal with crossing the street.
Car safety I can understand, but to be afraid to walk down a sidewalk, that's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I don't think the children are afraid. I think their parents are afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. You had a
Yeah, I had a comment actually for Mr. Snyder. He said that the funding so far from the Safe Routes has been from the state funding.
Right.
Did you you looked, obviously you probably have, into the Federal Highway Safety Administration. What is their role in this, and can that be tapped for more funding?
Yeah, the only reason we haven't gone after that yet is since we began this, and by the way, one thing I failed to mention is the idea is that we do this for all the schools in Glendale and try to get them all funded. The reason we haven't gone after the federal funding yet is because there hasn't been a federal funding cycle since we began. But I think the intent is that we're going to go after every Safe Routes to School funding source that comes out every time.
Right.
And there definitely will be some federal money available right now. It looks like the next federal cycle, I'm hearing from the state Safe Routes to School coordinator, maybe January or so.
Yeah.
It's a little bit up in the air. And after that, I suppose you're all familiar with Safety Lou and the fact that sort of Congress is now debating the update of Safety Lou, the next round of legislation. So we're still functioning under the guidelines of Safety Lou, which gives California a certain amount of money every year. Looks like the new legislation will very likely increase the amount of the federal funds, maybe as much as threefold. So when we go after the Safe Routes to School money from the feds, we have a better chance of getting more money. So this is going to be a continuing, as you saw, those first 6 schools, we had $3.6 million worth of projects come out of those. So it's going to take a multi-year effort to fund all of the improvements that we plan, and I think the idea is to go after every one of those funding opportunities.
And on the state level, how does the Department of Public Health play into any kind of funding? Do they have any programs that we could use for Safe Routes to School?
There's I don't think there's any direct public health. They're real good advocates, and they do programs like, there's the county place program, for example, that's funding Colin to help educate and advocate. But there's no direct funding for Safe Routes to School program from the State Department of Health, but they certainly are great promoters of the program.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one question to Wayne Coe. Assembly Bill 321, is that for during school hours? Decreasing the speed limit, is it during school hours, or is the prima facie speed limit from 25, you're dropping it down to 15?
Commissioner Sahakian, yes, I believe that is only dealing with speed hours. It's just like right now, the speed during school hours is 25 miles per hour around the school area. So, yes.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment briefly about how things are going. I'm really pleased to see that this has been successful so far. I know one of the things that Ryan mentioned when we started out with this program is, people sometimes are enthusiastic at first and they're willing to participate, but then as time goes by, you sometimes have a problem with, people dropping out and losing interest, and I'm glad to see that the momentum is still going. I remember when you first started out at R.D. White with the valet service in the morning, it was really impressive seeing this huge line of cars and, all the cones and people and everything, and the fact that you've been able to keep that up, on a steady basis, I think is great. I know that Dunsmore Elementary was one of the schools that was worked on for the 2009 program, and the improvements there are visible pretty obviously as well. I drive by there pretty much on a daily basis, and Dunsmore has topographical issues. It's halfway up a very steep hill. So I saw in your survey data that there are at least 2 kids that are riding their bikes to school at Dunsmore. I give those kids lots of credit because I ride my bike around there and it's really steep. The crosswalk in front of the school has been completely redone. It's now zebra striped with disco lights. It's got the advanced stop limit lines on it that are a new design. They're actually diamonds instead of a solid line. There's still some issues with blind spots in front of that school, but the pickup and drop-off is not nearly quite as chaotic as it used to be, and the reason is a lot of the parents are now using Lauderdale, which is the street 1 block over where the end of the playground is. And there's a stop sign there, so vehicles do have to come to a full stop, and again, they've zebra-striped crosswalk over there. But it's actually a little easier for pickup and drop-off to happen on Lauderdale because that stop sign is there and you don't have cars whizzing through the area. So I'm looking forward to the implementation on the schools you're going to work with for this year.
Great. And this, by the way, is what we're planned at Los Olivos and Lauderdale.
Okay. Yeah, the bump outs will make a difference.
Yeah, that's a really wide, so we're going to narrow down that intersection. But I just wanted to say, I give these workshops at a lot of cities, a lot of schools, and I think, everybody's enthusiastic at the workshop. After I leave the workshop, it's up to people like Kara and the schools and the parents to carry these things out. So it's really gratifying for me to see that she's actually taken these ideas and done all these great things with them. And there's also at Verdugo Woodlands, there's a parent by the name of Luana. Yeah. It takes parent champions to make this thing happen. And we're fortunate here to have some of those.
Yeah, and Verdugo, by the way, has been one of the streets in Glendale suggested as a possible candidate for a road diet, right, which would make a big difference in terms of Verdugo Woodlands. And my next-door neighbor across the street is a teacher at Verdugo Woodlands, so I get to hear about their problems on a regular basis as well. Thanks.
Anyone else?
One question to staff again. When was the last time we've done a traffic signal study at Geneva, Duran, and Balboa?
Chairman Welsh and Commissioner Sahakian, the intersection of Doran and Balboa actually meets the signal warrants for installation of traffic signal for the last maybe about 5 years or so. Mainly it's because of lack of funding. We cannot put in the signal. Right now, the challenge at that intersection is we only have one crosswalk on the west side, crossing the west leg of that intersection. And if we stripe in the crosswalk without signalizing that intersection, crossing the east leg, with the existing crossing guard, she will not be able to handle the pedestrian flow.
The volume, you mean?
That's correct, yes.
Volume.
Yes.
And could some of this funding be used for signal installation?
Well, it can be, except that we didn't apply for it. But if, we have very specific projects that when we make the applications that we apply for very specific things. We didn't apply for that, but it could be applied for.
And you prioritize these projects based on?
Well, based on a number of things, but primarily what the feedback we got at the workshop, what people told us were the most important locations, and where the school district tells us that the most important locations are, and what Fred and Jono and Wayne tell me the most important location they'd rather fix first. So, and we kind of see, which are the worst locations that, the hardest streets for kids to cross. We'll try to fix those first.
Is the city's matching component also stipulated as to how it needs to be spent?
Well,
or do we have more flexibility with that?
It's 10% of the overall program. So whatever we apply for, the city.
So it's still the same
right,
budget. Okay.
Yeah. But what we're going to do this next time around, I think the city's actually gone ahead and done a lot of the painting, striping. And we're going to build that into their budget so that part of that 10% is going to be what the city would have done anyhow.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Excuse me, do you know if there's any funding opportunities through Measure R, through the MTA?
I think there will be. The last I checked with Metro, they hadn't finished all their guidelines of how they wanted sort of get into the mechanics of distributing Prop R funds.
Right.
But I believe there will be some. And at least there will be a portion that goes back to cities for local control. And that portion of it will be, of course, up to the city how you all want to spend it.
Right.
And it's a substantial amount of money.
Yeah. But as far as the sort of the countywide competitive funds go, like I said, the last I knew, they hadn't come up with the guidelines yet, but I guess your mayor's on the Metro board, so if you have ideas of how you would like Metro to distribute that money, he might be able to help.
Yeah.
Anything more? So can we assume that we're all in favor of asking staff to look into this issue of traffic light at Geneva, Balboa, and Duran?
I am, and I think as a body, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Sanson, we can only make a recommendation to council, correct, for installation of the signal at this location or prioritizing this location for signal installation.
Mr. Chair, and Commissioner Sahakian, that's correct. Although certainly a recommendation would be this starting point here.
Okay.
Okay, and since, we have met the warrants, Mr. Coe, so the staff backs us up on this.
That's correct. Actually, right now, with the first grant of $900,000, we're also adjusting different improvements right now. Some of them, it's probably costing more than we originally thought, but some of them is less. And also, some of the improvements, like striping and signing, we could do it with other sorts of funding. So we're trying to work out whether we will be able to put in that signal or not. Right now, it's going to be very tight because, after all, traffic signal costs roughly about $200,000 nowadays.
But I'm not even talking the money coming from this $900,000 that's allocated for school safety. I'm talking in general. You have a set of signals. You do 5 to 6 signal installations citywide annually.
With the current budget, we're doing close to 0 right now.
Oh, is that bad?
It's very bad right now.
Maybe we can do one.
But under normal circumstances, you would do several. So
that's correct. Yes.
So when there's capital allocation, once again, it can be rising to the top of the list.
How are the signals on? Is it Monterey? How were they funded?
That was funded by the ARA funds, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act.
And as well, the same thing, I think, for the AB 321. We'd like to have some work done on briefing the Commission on what can be done to adjust some of those.
Staff will do that, yes.
Yes. Thank you. With that, I think I'm done, unless there's any other final follow-ups. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the guests as well. Okay, next item on the agenda, please.
Item 6 is Commission staff comments, updates.
Mr. Coe, do you have any updates for the Commission?
No, I don't.
Okay. Any other words for
I
staff?
do have a question. On one occasion, I even called Jono. He was out of town. Several signals in the college, Glendale College area, they were on flash. I don't recall the date. and I was expecting that they'll be fixed, let's say within the 6-7 hour period. I know we contracted out. But the following day in the morning, they were still on flash, and it was a traffic mess. And I even asked Jono, in a situation like that, you need to have some type of traffic control and some police officers to assist during the peak rush to ease the traffic. Otherwise, I mean, the queue was on the freeway main line. I'm assuming it was a power outage.
Yes, most often actually is this when the signal when the power went off, and then when it comes back on, the signal will be on flash.
Right.
Sometimes our maintenance crew, even if they respond right away, going to the signal, we will not be able to do anything until the power is restored. You're correct, actually. And the section of we do go around mountain, anything happen to that traffic signal, traffic backs up because that's the local communication, access to the freeway, the 2 freeway, and also to the southern part of Glendale Avenue. That is a critical intersection that every time when we are aware that something has happened, we try to dispatch police if they have.
And honestly, I've seen police help out that location, but it should be the college police, which I haven't seen them at the intersections. I mean, the traffic is generated 90% by the college during AM rush hour, but you don't see them at those intersections, and we're using the city resources to do the traffic control. So I do suggest communicating to the college in such an instance. They need to have their cops out there.
They have jurisdiction to be able to do that?
At the driveways, I believe they do.
At the driveways,
At the ingress, egress to the college, they do.
For example, the civics, that's correct. The college driver will be able to do that. Yes.
Mr. Coe, was that, wow, that's
Yes.
loud, excuse me. And now that light in particular, I think I was one of the vehicles that was stuck, maybe behind you, Commissioner Sahakian, at that blinking red light. Is that not controlled by Caltrans in terms of being able to set the timer on that light right off the freeway?
Commissioner Yukopian, the intersection of Vidugo and Mountain is controlled by the signal.
No, not that intersection. I think it was the intersection getting
Just south of the on-ramp.
south of the on-ramp, correct.
That is a city-maintained signal.
Oh, that is city-maintained?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other commission comments?
One other comment, construction in the Rossmoen area, there's, I believe, a lining project going on at this time where they're laying down the temporary pipes so they can line I'm assuming, the concrete lines. You guys might want to have an inspector drive by, I don't know if it comes from Public Works, to check on some of the construction. A couple of instances, there were no flaggers and they were running traffic, two-way traffic in a 12-foot lane. It was not a safe situation.
Staff will do that.
During, Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, okay.
So, let me just jump in here. I just wanted to mention briefly, I did attend a one-day UCLA extension course, Innovations in Parking Management, that was held last week. In fact, our parking manager, Tad Dombrowski, was also in the class. It was very interesting, a lot of material that was covered, and mostly there was a discussion about the shift in emphasis regarding parking. You know, previously the philosophy was to enable motorists to find convenient parking at any time or location, and that has kind of shifted over the years to ensure that existing parking facilities are used efficiently, with most spaces being occupied on most days. And there was a lot of discussion about using flexibility in pricing to achieve that, and to have policies, programs, and techniques that affect the supply, location, the cost, or the demand for parking. We had presentations from Bill Fulton, who is the mayor of Ventura, who talked about Ventura's downtown parking plan. There was a traffic manager from the city of Pasadena who talked about what they're doing with parking in Pasadena, especially in the Old Town area. There was a very interesting discussion from Professor Don Shoup of UCLA about pricing strategy. And one of the things he said that I thought was very interesting was that cities who set parking rates by ordinance are doing a wrong thing. You should not be setting your rates by ordinance. You should be setting your occupancy. So what you can do is have an ordinance that says your goal, say in the downtown area, is to achieve 85% occupancy of parking spaces. Then the price can float up or down to achieve that level. And you always have, if you want to have 15, spaces open, most of your spaces are occupied, but there are still a few that are open for people that want to park. And especially with the multi-space meters that are on, a networked computerized system, it can be obviously programmed to do that. We also talked a little bit about advances in occupancy sensors. Instead of using loop detectors under parking spots, they're now using these little wireless occupancy sensors that are small enough to fit inside a little reflective, like a bot's dot, that you can put in each spot. And they're battery powered, their maintenance and operations are much cheaper than the loop detectors. And cities that have implemented them have been able to increase revenue for parking fines because they have much better information about when vehicles are entering and leaving spaces. There was also a presentation on parking technology in the Minneapolis area and the use of electronic signage on freeways to direct commuters to parking lots that still have spaces as opposed to those that are filled up, and also that display travel times for vehicles versus transit to let you know that maybe it's time to get out of your car if you could get there faster via transit. And also some information on bicycle parking and transit station parking. And I have all of the presentation material for that. If anyone's interested in any of these specific topics, I can get you the presentation. Sure, I would be great. Yeah. Oh, and I have something for you. That's it for me.
Okay. I just have one update. As the Commission is aware, 2 weeks ago, the City Council heard the arguments for the appeal of the G&S taxi case, and both Commissioner Weissman and myself were there to represent the Commission. The Council did decide to take up the appeal. It was tentatively scheduled for July 20th, although in my last conversation with Mr. Bagdanian, he was going to be trying to see if there could be additional time because there were so many complex issues that were brought up as we all went through at the hearing itself, that we may need a little bit more time to brief the council, and there was even talk of a joint study session. So it's still up in the air, but I'm sure we'll all hear whether the July 20th date will happen or not happen.
Did you get a sense of how the appeal will be held in the context of maybe changing the policy?
Well, that's what it really all came down to, was that because it was a policy issue, the appeal just could not be heard in a vacuum, that all of the other elements that we discussed and were debating at that hearing had to really be fully briefed to the council before they could really make a decision. Any other comments or questions about that? Okay, that's it. So I think we're done with Commission and staff updates. Next item, please.
Item 7 is adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, can we go back to the bigger bottles of water?